what you can't explain. It's coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. So I gotta be honest, today's video is kind of off the cuff because I have Google Alerts set up for a lot of the true crime cases I've covered in the past, just in case anything new pops up. You know, the big ones like Letitia Stalk, Lori Vallow, the Idaho murders, things like that. I just want to see if there's any new kind of information popping up. And one of the cases I have these Google Alerts on for is the Watts case, right? Shanann Watts, Bella, Cece, Nico. Because Chris Watts has just done a lot, you know, even after going away to prison, he's said a lot of things, he's done a lot of things, he keeps kind of popping up, he's writing letters to random women, he's giving interviews, he's found God, all of these things. So when I got a Google alert last week, it was for a Crime Online article, and it's basically saying that there's newly released letters that Chris Watts was writing from prison, not to his mom, you know, his best friend, his mom, Cindy, not to all of these random women who apparently just love killers and fall in love with them while they're behind bars, but to God, right? He was writing letters to God. In these letters, he basically blames everybody but himself, but specifically he blames all of these evil women who led him astray, led him off the path of being the good man that he is. And I was reading the article and I started having some thoughts and I started thinking, my brain started kind of spiraling, and then I went down this little mini rabbit hole of other letters Chris Watts has sent. And then I said, I got to talk to my people about this. I got to talk to my people about this and see what they think. It's been a while since I've talked about the Watts case, but I did talk about it extensively. So I will give you a quick little summary, but what our focus is going to be in this episode is not technically on what happened. It's going to be about my thoughts on Chris Watts, on Nicole Kessinger, on what their involvement was in what happened, and you'll see. Just bear with me. So I'll give you a little kind of breakdown first. And we're going to talk about some stuff today. In one of the most haunting and widely discussed true crime cases in recent memory, Chris Watts, by all outward appearances, was a devoted husband and father. And then he was also revealed to be an absolutely cold-blooded killer. On August 13th, 2018, Shanann Watts and her two young daughters, Bella and Celeste, were reported missing in Frederick, Colorado. Shanann was 34 years old. She was also 15 weeks pregnant with a son she had already named Nico. Friends and family were immediately concerned when Shanann missed a doctor's appointment and wasn't returning messages or calls, and this was very concerning because Shanann was always on her phone. The kind of work that she did meant that she would constantly have to be sort of like on social media, always communicating with people, and Shanann was just very social in general. She talked to lots of her friends and family members on a daily basis every day, especially now that she was pregnant. She was sending, photos, ultrasound photos and updates and things like that. So that same day, technically it was the following day, Chris Watts gave a series of awkward interviews pleading for their return. Interviews that would soon become infamous. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, before we go any further, let's have a quick break from the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. I want to take a second to talk about something that's a little bit less stressful than a murder investigation, like what's for dinner. Seriously, in my house, that question used to send shivers down my spine, just waves of anxiety, until I started using HelloFresh. I've been using HelloFresh since 2020. During the pandemic, it absolutely saved my peace of mind, and HelloFresh, for so many reasons and in so many ways, has totally changed the game for me, because between researching, writing, recording, editing, and then life stuff, all the stuff going on with the kids, dance and sports and school and field trips, I really just don't have a ton of time for meal planning and cooking. And that's exactly why I love HelloFresh. They deliver fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to my door, along with simple step-by-step recipes. They give you a recipe card, step-by-step instructions with pictures. Absolutely impossible to mess up, and these recipes and the meals that come from them, they actually taste amazing. Even better, HelloFresh has just introduced their ready-made meals. These are chef-crafted dishes ready in just 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That's basically faster than your average YouTube ad break. And they're very delicious. My favorite so far has been the beef bolognese. I love making beef bolognese, but it takes all day when you're making it from scratch. And this HelloFresh ready-to-make meal, which is, like I said, ready in 3 minutes, tastes almost as good as my homemade beef bolognese that takes 8 hours to make. With HelloFresh, you're going to get high-quality ingredients, fresh produce, proteins, and seasonal items, all without stepping foot in a grocery store. And HelloFresh is stepping it up even more in 2025 with tons of options. The 15-minute meals, their prep and bake kits, and those new ready-made meals that I mentioned. Whether you're into cooking or you just need to eat fast, there's something for everyone. And that's really why I do love HelloFresh too, because you can get these meals done really quick. Or if you kind of just want to take your time, bring your kids and your family in on the fun, pour a glass of wine, and enjoy an evening of cooking, you can slow it down and go at your own pace. So here's the deal. Claim your free ready-made meals for life and 50% off your first box at HelloFresh.com using code stephanieharlowe RM. You're going to get one free ready-made meal per box while supplies last with active subscription. 50% off applied as discount on first box, new subscribers only, and it varies by plan. That's free ready-made meals for life and 50% off your first box at HelloFresh.com with code stephanieharlowe RM. I'm serious. Give it a try. It's a great deal, and HelloFresh is a game changer for busy people who still want to eat well. Just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen and use my code stephanieharlowe RM to grab your free ready-made meals for life and 50% off your first box. Your future, less stressed out, better fed self will thank you. And thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Let's dive in. Okay, so we're back from the break, and I was talking about Chris Watts and his infamous interviews that he gave when his wife and 2 daughters went missing.
I mean, right now, I don't even want to just throw anything out there. I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she event? Could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe, I want them back now. That's what's in my head. If they're safe right now, they're going to come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. If they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here. My kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And it's last night, during when they usually eat dinner, it was just I miss them. I miss telling them, hey, you got to eat that or you're not going to get your dessert, and just you're not going to get your snack after. I miss that. I miss them, cuddle up on their couches. They have a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just it was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that. I needed that last night, and for nobody to be here last night and to go into their rooms and know that I wasn't going to turn the rain machines on, and I know that I wasn't going to turn their monitor on, and know I wasn't going to kiss them to bed tonight. That's why last night was just horrible. I couldn't do it.
And I just have to speak on this again. Even though I've watched this interview way too many times, hundreds of times probably, even though I've talked about it dozens of times. I have to speak on it again really quickly because the context of it haunts me incessantly. Incessantly. Never in the history of true crime have we seen a perpetrator be so brazen as Chris Watts. Never have I witnessed such duplicity and such a lack of self-awareness. The absolute audacity exhibited here, it is sociopathic, okay? Probably rivaled only by Letitia Stauch. I still think Chris Watts has her beat by just a little bit. Maybe they're tied for first place of the absolute audacity and just evilness. But yeah, I think, Chris Watts and Letitia Stauch, in their interviews, both sucked. They sucked. So this specific interview took place on August 14th. It was a Tuesday. So literally just a day after Chris had murdered his entire family with his bare hands. And after all the lies and after all the deflection had run out, Chris was eventually left with no choice but to tell detectives the truth about exactly what happened in the early morning hours of August 13th. And it is beyond vile, beyond evil. In my opinion, what Chris Watts did is the most demonic and unforgivable thing any human could ever do by a long run, okay? And Chris would eventually also tell the detectives that he was having an affair with his coworker, Nicole Kessinger. He was having an affair because he was feeling trapped in his marriage, because he and Shanann had been growing apart, and he felt divorcing her would be too complicated with another child on the way. And if you remember correctly, Shanann had been away on a business trip in Arizona. She returned home late on the evening of August 12th, 2018. It was actually more like in the early morning hours of August 13th. I think she got home between like 1:30 and 2 a.m. And according to Chris Watts, when his wife got home, they had sex. He said that they had sex. And then he also said that this led his wife, Shanann, to feel that they were reconnecting, that they were getting back on track with their marriage, with their connection, with their bond. But he had already made the decision to leave her and be with Nicole. Now, this is my opinion, right? Well, actually, this isn't my opinion because Chris Watts is a trash heap of a human. But this trash heap of a human, in my opinion, hadn't already made the decision to leave Shanann for Nicole. He'd already made the decision to kill Shanann and his 2 daughters. Okay, that was already premeditated. We know this. He also confessed to that. But I think he wanted to have sex with Shanann one last time, which is beyond sick. So if they really did have sex, it wasn't because he was like, oh, I'm going to divorce her and, this is just me saying goodbye. It was, I'm going to kill her. And I guess this is me saying goodbye, but once again, beyond sick. Now, according to Chris, he woke up to get ready for work that morning of the 13th around 4 a.m. And at that time, Shanann also woke up. And this is when he claims he told her he wanted a separation. She confronted him about having an affair. He admitted it. She allegedly told him he would never see his kids again. Now, I don't believe this for many reasons. Most of all, I don't believe this because if Chris was that rageful, right, because he says she told him, you're never going to see your kids again, he got so rageful, he then got on top of Shanann and began choking her until she died. If that was the case, and you were just so rageful that your wife wasn't going to let you see your daughters, why'd you kill your daughters? Well, what? Why'd you do that? And so at some point, while Chris is strangling Shanann, he said that his daughter Bella entered the room and asked, what's wrong with mommy? And Chris told Bella that Shanann was sick. He then wrapped Shanann's body in a sheet and dragged it downstairs as Bella and Cece watched. Chris put Shanann's body on the floor of his truck. He then put his 2 daughters into the back seat of that truck while their mother's dead body was on the floorboards, and he drove them all to a remote oil field site owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum. Now, this would have been about a 45-minute drive from the Watts home in Frederick to the Anadarko Petroleum fields. So imagine the fear and confusion that Bella and Cece would have been going through during this time. Not only the drive, but before, the time before. Bella walking in and seeing her father choking her mother to death. Bella and Cece watching their mother's body being dragged around like garbage by their father and then having to drive almost an hour while their mother lay motionless at their feet. Absolutely torturous. Like, it's one thing what he did to them, killed them, but he made sure that every single one of them, Shanann, Bella, and Cece, just were absolutely terrified and devastated in the hours and the moments before their deaths. So when they arrived to the oil field, Chris buried Shanann's body in a shallow grave near the oil tanks. He then returned to his two beautiful, innocent children, the daughters who loved him more than anything in the world, who thought he was an absolute hero, and he killed them. First, while Bella watched, Chris smothered her little sister Cece with Cece's blanket. And when he turned to Bella, she begged for her life. She asked her father to not do to her what he had done to Cece. And then he smothered her in the same way. He didn't even say anything to her. He didn't even respond to her. He didn't say anything. He didn't give her words of comfort. He didn't tell her everything was going to be okay. He literally told the police, like, yeah, I didn't say anything. Like, I'm a psychopath. Bella was 4. Cece was 3. I will never forget them. I have Bella and Cece's birthdays in my phone, programmed in my phone's calendar, so that every year on their birthday I would think about them. But I have to be honest with you, since this case happened in 2018, there really hasn't been a lot of days that have gone by where I haven't thought about Bella and Cece. So I will never forget them. None of us should ever forget them.
You can sit with us.
Thank you.
You can sit with us. You can sit with Cece in bed. It's Cece.
Okay.
Oh, I'll stay with her. Don't take her away.
I'm not taking her away.
Don't take me. Don't be scared. Please don't get to be scared. Don't be scared. It's okay. It's okay for them.
Also, I want to add that nothing Chris said in that initial television interview made sense, once you know the context of how often he and his kids had been apart in the previous months. And I mean, honestly, it never made sense to me to begin with. This was one of the interviews where I watched and I was like, this dude's lying. I remember exactly where I was. I remember where I was standing. I was in my bedroom. I was watching the TV. I was getting ready for the day, and his interview came on. And I was like, this guy's lying. He's lying through his teeth. He's not saying one true thing here. He's full of shit. But in the previous months, Chris really hadn't been around his children that much. On June 27th, Shanann and the girls flew to North Carolina for a vacation where they would be able to spend time with both Shanann's family as well as Chris's family. And of course, Chris's family made Shanann as miserable as they possibly could every single moment she spent with them, because they suck. But the plan was that Chris would stay behind and continue working and then fly out later to join them. And Chris didn't fly to North Carolina until July 31st. Over a month later, meaning that during all that time he was alone at home, not seeing his daughters, not telling them that they wouldn't get their dessert if they didn't finish their meals, not putting them to bed, and not turning on their sound machine. At the time they went missing in mid-August, Chris Watts would have had plenty of practice and experience with being away from his children, so him acting like this one night of not being able to do these things was just so emotionally taxing on him. It was just bullshit. So, as we know, especially after this interview aired, the investigation escalated quickly. Chris's body language, contradictory statements, and lack of genuine emotion raised red flags almost immediately. Within days, he had failed a polygraph and then confessed to murdering Shanann. But initially, if you remember, he claimed she'd killed the children, and then he had killed her in a retaliatory rage. Obviously, that story didn't hold. Not one of us believed it. In fact, I don't think anyone in the world believed it besides Chris's mother, Cindy, who's an idiot. So under further interrogation and evidence collection, including cell phone data, GPS data, and a chilling video from a neighbor's surveillance camera, if you know, you know, Chris ultimately admitted to killing all 3. He, like I said, strangled Shanann in their home, drove with her body and their 2 daughters alive at that point to an oil site, and there he smothered Bella and Celeste. He disposed of all 3 of their bodies. He put his 2 daughters in separate oil tanks. He shoved his daughters' bodies into this small opening at the top of an oil tank. It's absolutely disgusting. So on November 6th, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all charges in order to avoid the death penalty, and he was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole. He's currently incarcerated at Dodge Correctional in Wisconsin. A key element that fueled national obsession with this case was Chris's affair with his coworker named Nicole Kessinger. The two had begun a relationship in the weeks leading up to the murders, and Kessinger later told investigators that she believed Chris was in the final stages of a divorce. She said he didn't wear a wedding ring when he was at work. He didn't talk about having a partner. He didn't even talk about having kids until they'd known each other for a few weeks. And then he told her he had kids, and then he told her he did have a wife, he was married, but they were in the process of a divorce. Basically, he was sleeping in the basement. They were living parallel lives in the same house. They were trying to sell the house, all of these things. And Nicole Kessinger was like, okay, that makes sense. And Nicole also claimed to have no knowledge of Shanann's pregnancy, and she expressed complete shock at the crimes. Now, Nicole Kessinger did cooperate fully with law enforcement. She provided text messages, search history, and other records, at least the stuff she didn't delete. She deleted a lot of stuff. However, despite her cooperation, because of all of these other little things, public scrutiny towards her has remained intense. Many have speculated that Nicole may have known more than she let on, especially given the fact that she searched online for information about Amber Frey and about how much money Amber Frey made off of the Scott Peterson case, right? And she doesn't start searching these Amber Frey things until after Shanann and the girls are, missing, and then Chris has suspicion on him, but still, Nicole Kessinger went up and searched, how much money did Amber Frey make off of her book deal, things like that. Just very weird. And to this day, some people continue to question the full extent of her involvement, though she has never been charged or formally accused of any wrongdoing. Perhaps the biggest red flag in the public's eyes was Nicole's Google search history. According to discovery documents, she had actually searched for information on Shanann and Chris Watts as early as 2017, okay, before Shanann was reported missing, before Chris claimed he told Nicole about his alleged separation, before she even met Chris Watts, allegedly, okay? She also reportedly searched for phrases like, man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. Will the man I'm having an affair with leave his wife? Do men marry their mistresses? Things like that. So these searches gave the impression that Nicole actually was aware of Shanann. She was possibly jealous and also interested in the media fallout of high-profile cases involving mistresses. Additionally, Chris and Nicole's relationship moved quickly and intensely. They began seeing each other in late June or early July 2018, and by mid-July, Nicole was telling him she wanted to help him find an apartment. They were openly discussing a future together. This was just weeks before the murders. Also, when she realized that she might be implicated, Nicole Kessinger deleted many texts, pictures, and call logs between herself and Chris. She also told him to delete his stuff, right? She admitted that to the police. She also cleared her browser history. Although she voluntarily gave her phone to investigators and explained that she deleted the data because she panicked and didn't want to be a part of a public scandal, this action obviously added to public suspicion that she was trying to hide something. Because she was. Now, Chris Watts has added fuel to the fire in never-before-seen letters written from his prison cell. Some of these letters are written to God, some of them to the multiple women that Chris has been corresponding with from behind bars. And in a 2021 letter written to God, Chris wrote about Nicole Kessinger. He claimed that he was misled and tempted by a harlot. He said, quote, I was weak, and I allowed myself to be fooled by an evil woman. She led me from the path of righteousness. I know that you will deal with her someday. She will be judged. You know my heart, Lord. I am a man after your heart. I seek your face. I allowed her to sway me. End quote. Oh, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. And we're going to talk about Chris's delusionment. Is that a word? His absolute, inability to grasp reality or take responsibility in any way. Now, on a similar vein, Chris wrote in another letter the following year that, quote, the lips of an immoral woman may be smooth, but no amount of paint on her face can disguise her evil heart. end quote. In another letter dated March of 2020, Watts said, quote, "The words of a harlot have brought me low. Her flattering speech was like drops of honey that pierced my heart and soul. Little did I know that all her guests were in the chamber of death," end quote. I think he's trying to be deep, like poetic, but that shit just does not make any sense, okay? Let me look at it again. It does not make any sense. All of her guests were in the chamber of death? All of your guests are in the chamber of death, dude. What are you talking about? Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I think he's just trying to be deep. Her flattering speech was like drops of honey that pierced my heart and soul. Like, honey's not sharp, dude, okay? Honey's not sharp. Like, you could have said she pierced your heart and soul with daggers that were, dipped in honey or something. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. But the point of the matter is, he's trying to be deep, but he can't because he's not a deep person. Like I said, we're going to discuss this more, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on Chris. Now, Chris doesn't just blame Nicole Kessinger, however. He also has the audacity and demonic energy to blame Shanann herself. Now listen, I know that there are people out there still who blame Shanann. I think it's sick and weird, and that the people who are doing that, if you're watching, you need help. You need help. You're probably also writing letters to Chris Watts in prison, okay? But obviously, Shanann is not to blame for Chris Watts cheating, nor is she to blame for him killing her and their children. I feel like that goes without saying. It's not a hot take, right? But to some, in some circles, in some dark, dirty, musty corners of the internet, people actually say this shit. It's absolutely insane. Y'all are insane. So previously, we learned that Chris had confided in another prisoner, Dylan Tallman, about his marriage, his relationship with Nicole Kessinger, and the murders of his wife and children. Now, whatever his motives were, as far as Dylan Tallman goes, we know that what Tallman is claiming is true because Chris said these things to him in letters that media outlets have viewed and confirmed. So I don't know if there's some controversy around Dylan Tallman, if people are like, oh, he's canceled or he's controversial. I don't care. All I care is that Chris wrote these letters to him. News outlets have seen these letters. I think some of them have been released. And we know that Chris said these things. So Chris told Dylan that his marriage was not a happy one and that he had become the main caregiver to Bella and Cece because Shanann was focused on her career. He said, quote, "She was really busy with her job and everything it required," end quote. Oh, poor Chris, you're not getting enough attention. Chris also claimed that Shanann was a control freak. Hold on, he called her something else that I just read in another article. Not only did he call her a control freak, but he described her as domineering and self-absorbed, which is rich, Chris. Self-absorbed. That's the pot calling the kettle black, right? So because Shanann was this horrible, nagging, domineering control freak, Chris was left alone, open to be susceptible to the attention of another woman. And according to Chris, when he met Nicole Kessinger, he had started working out, he was losing weight, he felt good about himself physically, and this new woman, Nicole, was everything he had been wanting and missing. Quote, "She was just everything my wife wasn't like with me. She was just nice and not a control freak. We could make decisions together. We knew each other for a while, but we didn't start messing around until 6 weeks before. I was not thinking. We worked together, we had chemistry, and I fell into temptation. She was the forbidden fruit," end quote. Yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about this stuff when Chris says that Nicole was everything that Shanann wasn't. She gave him and he got from her everything that Shanann wasn't providing. We're going to talk about my views on that. But now listen, there's a few things about Chris Watts that we know to be true, besides the fact that he's a demon on earth who literally was born from the fiery depths of hell. We know that since arriving to prison, Chris has found God. Before prison, Chris had never even read the Bible, but since, he's read it cover to cover more than once. And he told investigators that his aunt and uncle, who are missionaries, are really proud and amazed at how mature he has become. Chris said, quote, "I never knew I could have a relationship with God like I do now. It's like this amazing grace with all of this, but I just wish nobody had to pay any kind of price for this," end quote. Oh, your salvation came at the price of your wife and your children's lives. That's basically what he's saying. He's also said that committing himself to God had stopped him from harming himself or taking his own life, because apparently while he was in the Weld County Jail before his sentencing, Chris said that the other prisoners would yell at him and they would tell him that they hoped he would, take his own life in his cell. And for a while he was listening to them, and he was letting them get under his skin and get to them. Obviously not, Chris, because you're still here. You're still alive. Maybe he's just not that great at following directions. But yeah, God helped him find the strength to not listen to the inmates who were telling him that he was a terrible, horrible person who probably doesn't deserve to live. So God helped Chris avoid the truth about himself. That's what I'm hearing. So Chris also said that he felt people were defining him by one moment in his life, that they didn't know what happened before and they don't know what's going to happen later. Obviously, to that, I say that referring to the brutal and heartless murders of your wife and children can hardly be constituted as one moment in life. Chris also said, quote, I know I shouldn't really, take to heart what other people think about me so much. It's just a matter of what God thinks about me, what his opinion is, not anybody else's. End quote. God hates you, Chris, just like everybody and anybody else. He hates you. You're never going to meet him. You're going to return to the depths of hell from which you came. God hates you. Okay, what else do we know about Chris aside from his new relationship with God that's one-sided and apparently absolves him of any guilt or responsibility? A relationship with God does not seem to have made Chris mature enough to not continue engaging in the bad and, dare I say, sinful behavior that got him into this position in the first place. From prison, Chris has tons of female pen pals who he talks to about his wife and daughters and who he also engages in some dirty sex talk with. All right? Which is also rich, now that I'm talking about it, because he's got all these words for Nicole about how she'll be judged and she's a Jezebel while he conducts himself this way. Very godly of you, Chris. Very godly. The LDS Church welcomes you. So anyways, one of these female pen pals is Sherilyn Cadle, who had corresponded with Chris in letters and who had at least one 3-hour contact visit with him, which means she went to the prison to visit him and sit with him. And during this visit, Sherilyn was able to speak to Chris, which sounds absolutely horrifying, by the way, to have to sit there in the same room as Chris Watts and not just beat him senseless. I don't know how you could do that, but Chris had told Sherilyn that he basically tried to make his wife Shanann miscarry. He gave her an Oxycontin to end her pregnancy. He also admitted to trying to kill Bella and Cece hours before he actually did, which takes away his whole story of, how they walked in and this wasn't planned, and he just was so angry at Shanann for saying that he was never going to see the kids again. He's so full of shit. So Sherilyn Cadle said, quote, at times when he would talk about the murders, his eyes would turn so black. He would just get a different look on his face, and he talked about it so nonchalantly, like going down to get a cup of coffee, end quote. Yes, that's pretty much the way he confessed to what he did to his kids, too. It was the most bizarre, chilling thing, the way he just calmly explained what he did with absolutely zero emotion. In a letter to Sherilyn Cadle, Chris again shifted the blame for everything onto Nicole Kessinger. Cadle said, quote, he was very mesmerized by her, meaning Kessinger. He just said in his letters that had it not been for her and the power she had over him, she pulled at him constantly, that his family would still be alive today, end quote. Damn. Very, very strong statements, strong sort of suggestions and accusations. But I do think that this is important, and I'm going to tell you why in a little bit later. So Chris had also been sending juicy sex letters to multiple female pen pals who would send him sexy pictures because they believe he's handsome and misunderstood. And this is actually a phenomenon that has fascinated psychologists and criminologists, and I feel like just humans for decades, right? Why do women do this? Why do they become infatuated and like fall in love with killers, basically, right? With horrible, evil killers. When women form romantic or emotional attachments to men who have committed horrific crimes like murder, especially when those crimes involve intimate partners or children, it does seem to go against the very nature of human behavior, because it seems pretty obvious if a man's already shown himself to be a danger towards women and children, especially women and children that he claimed to love, you would think that women, any woman, would see that this person is someone they should stay away from, right? Like, he's dangerous. He's really capable of anything. Psychologically, there are a few things that could be at play here. There is something called hybristophilia, otherwise known as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. And this theory states that some people are drawn to the danger, dominance, or power that they perceive in a violent criminal. There's also the appeal of control in their relationship, right? Falling for someone who's behind bars and therefore contained and dependent, which makes the dynamic feel emotionally safer for the women. Like, where's this guy gonna go? Who's he gonna cheat on me with? What's he gonna do? He's in prison. Something like this most likely developed from a young age, and David Wilson, who's a professor of criminology at Birmingham City University, has said, quote, often hybristophiliac women or men have had a lot of childhood trauma, often sexual or physical abuse. In other words, they had very little control over their childhood. Therefore, marrying someone behind bars is a way to vicariously gain that control they crave. Their love object is controlled by the penal system, end quote. Now, another thing at play could be a savior complex. Some women believe they can fix or heal the killer. They see past the crime and focus on the man's potential for redemption. They may believe that their love or compassion will help him change, or that they can unlock a misunderstood soul who's been cast out by society. I also personally think that for these women, it's not so much thinking the man can change, but thinking that she is the one who can change him. She has that special key that can unlock the secret good person that is hiding underneath the skin of the killer. And this belief taps into something deeply personal and psychological, which is often tied to identity, self-worth, and the fantasy of being uniquely chosen. I think these days the kids call these types of women pick-me's. Now, there's a lot of factors that contribute to this, not just the savior complex, but also something called exception fantasy, which is the idea that you are the exception, not the rule. Another factor that adds context here is rejection of the victim, which, like I said, we've seen intensely illustrated on the internet with so many blaming Shanann Watts for being a bad wife, for nagging Chris, being too focused on her career when she should have been giving him the attention that a man needs from his woman. Way too many people talking in this way and basically blaming Shanann for what happened. So the woman who gets involved with the killer tells herself that the murdered wife was the source of emotional pressure, conflict, or misunderstanding. In this mental rewrite, the crime gets rationalized as a tragic outcome of the wrong relationship. So if she can be the right woman, understanding, supportive, loyal, he'll become a better man. He won't hurt her because she's not like the woman that he killed. She's not like his wife. And this creates not only a sense of intimacy, but a sense of specialness. The killer is often viewed not as a monster, but as someone broken, misunderstood, or wounded. And if she believes she's the only one who sees through the mask to his true self, then she becomes essential to his redemption. That belief can be incredibly intoxicating for someone with unmet emotional needs. Some women will even frame the killer's interest in them as a kind of moral pivot. If he can love me, if he writes me poetry, if he prays with me from his cell, if he confesses his guilt to me, if he tells me secrets about what he did to his wife and children, I must be the reason for his change. And that gives the relationship a purpose beyond romance. It becomes a very important mission, one that can quickly become tied to these women's ego and identity. And I think this had a lot to do with why Nicole Kessinger became involved with Chris Watts in the first place, because she too was hoping to be the exception and not the rule. And finally, the one thing we definitely know about Chris Watts is that it doesn't matter who he blames, because he's always going to try and shift the blame to anyone but himself. I get it. Like, he's trying to blame Nicole from prison. She tempted him. She set him down the wrong path. And I will be honest with you, there was and still is a lot that didn't make sense or add up. A lot of things that it didn't seem Nicole Kessinger was being completely honest about. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, because it's important to discuss it and acknowledge that it's there. But does this mean that Nicole had a part in what Chris did to his wife and children? No, it doesn't mean that. Does this mean that she knew what he planned to do to his wife and children? No, I don't believe it means that either. Could Nicole be bending the truth so she looks like less of a bad person? Yeah, sure, definitely. But in my opinion, she did bend the truth. And in some cases was allegedly, in my opinion, lying. So whatever her motives were for doing so, I do believe that there were things Nicole didn't say and some things that she exaggerated, and she was trying to paint a narrative that made her look as innocent as possible. Now, Nicole told police detectives that she'd met Chris Watts in early May or June, and like I said, she noticed that he didn't wear a wedding ring. He never said anything about being in a relationship, and it wasn't till around Father's Day that Chris told her he had 2 daughters.
He didn't have a wedding ring on his finger. And every time I talked to him, he didn't tell me that he was in a relationship. He didn't even mention his kids right away either. And then one day he told me that he had 2 kids. I was like, that's pretty cool. And started telling me about his kid.
That sounded like a sarcastic comment.
No, I thought it was kind of cute. I was like, oh, he's a dad. It was like right around Father's Day too. So whenever that is that in June?
Yes, it did sound like a sarcastic comment, right? When Nicole's like, oh, that's so cute, you have kids. Because I don't think it's a hot take to say that Nicole wasn't a huge fan that Chris had kids. On August 12th, the day before Shanann, Bella, and Cece went missing, Nicole texted a friend named Charlotte Nelson. And in this text, Nicole said, quote, been kind of hanging out with a guy, keeping it a secret, feels like every dude I meet has kids these days, and if they don't, they have commitment issues or some BS. I just feel like I will always be second place, like he's been there, done that. It's early though, we will see, end quote. This is an important text message. Nicole's saying, like, it seems like every guy either has kids or he's damaged, he's got commitment issues. Well, yeah, you're in your 30s, right? So yeah, most of the guys you're encountering are probably going to, maybe have kids or be married or whatever. But she's like, I just feel like I'll never come first. And yeah, when somebody has kids, technically you never would come first. But then she says, it's early though, so we'll see. As in, is she saying kind of like, hey, I feel like he'll always put his kids before me, but I got to kind of figure out whether or not there's some wiggle room with that, whether or not I can sort of wedge my way in and become more important than his kids. It's early, we'll see. Kind of felt like that a little bit. And Nicole has this thing that I think not a lot of women, but some women have, where they don't want to date a man with kids because they want to be this man's number one priority, always, all the time. They don't want anything to ever come before them. And that is their right to feel that way. But if you do feel that way and it's a non-starter for you and it's like a deal breaker, you should not date someone who has kids. Nicole also claimed to the police that she not only didn't know the name of Chris's wife for a long time, but she didn't know that Shanann was pregnant.
You found out that his wife was pregnant.
Yes.
And you did not know that prior. And you found that out via the newspaper articles, and that caused you concern.
Well, I just realized that he was lying to me, and I was like, well, if you can lie to me about this, what else are you lying to me about? And it made me realize that maybe his wife was in danger at that point, and it was day 2 too, and she still wasn't home.
Now, this I do not believe. I don't believe that Nicole Kessinger didn't do her due diligence or any research to find out if Chris was being honest about his relationship status with his wife. Because according to Chris, it just wasn't working out. He was living in the basement as they prepared to sell the house. He and Shanann were completely separated, living their own lives, which made him free to pursue a relationship with someone else. And that happens a lot. So I understand Nicole being like, okay, yeah, that happens all the time. When you have kids and you have assets you have to sell off. But I also know women and just people in general, not even women, because I think men probably do this too, but I'm not a man, so I don't know what men do. I know women in the fact where, okay, you're starting to see somebody, you're sort of talking, it's getting kind of hot and heavy, you're feeling a connection, you're going to look him up on Facebook. Then you're going to look up his wife on Facebook, and you're going to kind of do a little research to see how honest is this guy being about, what's going on with him and his wife? Because as much as it happens that people get divorced and they still have to live together for a while they tie up loose ends, it also happens quite a bit that men say they're going through a divorce, but they're not, and they're just having a girl on the side and kind of keeping her, trailing along with him. And this is why a lot of women are like, oh, is he ever going to leave his wife for me? I mean, that's what basically Sex and the City, the entire series is just about these 4 women every, 3 episodes being like, is he going to leave his wife for me? No, he's probably not. And here's the thing. Not only would Nicole have looked at Chris Watts' Facebook, but she would have gone to Shanann's Facebook, and Shanann's Facebook was public because of the work that she did, right? She was part of this MLM thing, but she had a public Facebook. That was very important, that her Facebook was easily accessible and would be able to be viewed by anyone. And on Father's Day, when Nicole claims Chris told her he had kids, Shanann Watts posted about Chris. She said, quote, "Chris, we are so incredibly blessed to have you. You do so much every day for us, and you take such great care of us. You are the reason I was brave enough to agree to number 3, end quote. Number 3 obviously being Nico, the child that she was currently pregnant with when she posted that. And then 2 days later, on June 19th, Shanann posted her first ultrasound picture, writing that Chris was the best dad she and her daughters could ask for. So am I to believe that Nicole would have the ability to fully access Shanann Watts' Facebook, fully access these posts, which were public, but she didn't? She was just so secure, and she's so trusting of this guy that she's been talking to for a couple weeks that she doesn't even look at his wife's Facebook? I don't believe that. You will never convince me of that. I don't believe it. I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section. Do you believe that? I don't. So on June 27th, Shanann and her 2 daughters, Bella and Cece, they left for North Carolina, where they would be for 5 weeks, staying with family. Nicole told the police that during this time she would go to Chris's house twice, and the first time was on July 4th to help him set up his diet and exercise plan to help him reach his fitness goals. And Nicole said that when she got to Chris's house, she saw that there was a bed set up in the basement, so she believed his story that he and Shanann were still married but living separate lives. But she kind of got weird about being there, and she ended up leaving and saying that maybe they should take some space. I don't necessarily really believe that version of events either, especially about the July 4th visit, because in February of 2019, Chris Watts told the police that, in fact, he spent the night at Nicole's house or her apartment on July 4th. And when he woke up, he had several missed calls from his wife, Shanann, and he told Nicole he had to leave and go home in case Shanann had, surprisingly returned. And I believe Chris about this because in the discovery documents, texts between Nicole and Chris show that on the 4th, July 4th, Chris texted Nicole around 11 p.m. and said, "I just pulled up to your place." So I believe that Nicole was at his house earlier, but then she was like, "Oh, I told him we needed space, whatever, I just have to pull back a little bit." But then he slept at your house that night, so you didn't pull back at all. Now, at that point, when Chris told Nicole he had to go home because Shanann was texting him and stuff, he said Nicole got upset and expressed her frustration that she would never come first and told him it was best if they didn't see each other for a while. I believe that because we already know that Nicole, it's important to her to come first to the man that she's dating. And this specific man had a wife and children. So at that time, at least, that wasn't going to happen. And yes, I guess Nicole did kind of say hey, let's back off. Let's not see each other for a while. But see each other they did several times over the next few weeks. On July 14th, they shared a date at the car museum. On July 18th, Nicole sent Chris a picture of herself in her underwear. On July 28th, Nicole and Chris went to the Great Sand Dunes National Park and spent the night at a nearby campground. And on July 30th, Chris gave Nicole a cute little card with hearts all over it and with the lyrics from a song called Down to Earth by Through the Roots. Quote, "When I'm around you, I can feel peace in the atmosphere. You keep my engine roaring when you're pushing the pedal." Things like that, end quote. Apparently, Chris and Nicole, they loved cars, something they shared and had in common. Really, a love of cars really does just bond two people together. But that's why he used those lyrics. You get my engine revving. So Chris gave Nicole this card before he left to join Shanann and his children in North Carolina. And Nicole will tell the police, listen, I told Chris to try to work things out with his wife while he's in North Carolina. I've been telling him, try to work things out with his wife. We're going to hear her say that. But while Chris was gone, Nicole spent over 2 hours looking at wedding dresses on her cell phone, even though she would later claim to the police that it wasn't that serious yet with Chris, that it was still new and fresh. And I just do not believe that while she was searching up wedding dresses and asking the internet questions about whether the man she was seeing was actually going to leave his wife, that she was not aware that as far as Shanann was concerned, she and her husband were not on their way to a divorce. And she was also pregnant. Like I said, Nicole would have certainly taken her online research to Shanann's Facebook and seen all of these facts for herself. She would have known Shanann doesn't realize that she and her husband, Chris, are in the middle of this divorce and that they're no longer, having a close and connected relationship. Nicole told the police that prior to August 13th or 14th, she didn't know Shanann was pregnant. She says she didn't know until Shanann and the girls went missing. And according to her police interview, Nicole had read some newspaper articles on the 13th and 14th of August, and this is when she discovered that Shanann Watts, who at that time was still considered missing, was actually pregnant, several months pregnant. And obviously, when Nicole found out that Shanann was pregnant, she confronted Chris about lying to her about it, about not telling her that this wife, who he claimed, they had 2 kids, but they were going to get a divorce and split custody of the kids. He failed to mention that this same wife was also pregnant with another child.
What did that cause you to do with your phone, though?
Oh, what? When I deleted those?
Yeah.
I was just kind of grossed out by him, to be honest with you. I was just like, I don't know what's going on right now, but you just lied to me, and I don't want to see this come over my phone anymore. So I removed it.
So you already said, but you removed text messages?
I deleted all of his stuff because he lied to me. I mean, that's what it was. It was the hurt that made me delete it. And then it was the lie that made me start questioning everything else he'd been telling me for the last few days.
And that's when you decided to come forward?
Yes.
Okay. So just for context,
Yes.
When people delete stuff off phones, usually we go, hold on a second.
No, it wasn't
and that's why I wanted
malicious
to
at all. It wasn't malicious at all. He lied to me. It just hurt. Like, I had never felt like he'd ever lied to me before. And it was a big lie. I mean, telling somebody that you're in the midst of a divorce and then you have a wife that has a 15-week-old baby on the way is a huge, huge thing. And I was very taken back, and it was hurt. And so at that point, I deleted it. I had a few more quick things to say to him, and then I just got rid of him. That's literally what I did. I just cut him out of my life. It would have honestly been like a bad breakup kind of thing. Like, if none of this other stuff would have happened, that's what it would have been. That would have been the end of it.
The information was not destroyed because there was anything in there that would be harmful to you or potentially to Chris at this point, but harmful to you in particular. That's not why you did it.
No.
You did it out of, excuse my language, this guy's an asshole, so I'm getting rid of him, and I'm getting this stuff off my phone.
That was like me kicking him out of my life.
Okay.
And then, like I said, and then realizing that he lied, that was when I was like, okay, maybe his family is in danger and they're not coming back and they're not staying with a friend.
So Nicole is actually really vocal about deleting those text messages, the ones between her and Chris. And she says it's not because she has anything to hide, but because she realized Chris Watts was an asshole, so she was getting rid of him and getting this stuff off her phone. I don't really believe that either, right? I definitely think she was trying to hide it. I'm going to tell you why, because she has Google history and internet search history where she's like, oh, how can the cops get text messages off a phone? Can cops retrieve deleted text messages? She wasn't worried about like, oh, I can't open my phone and see this man's name or see his messages and his lies to me. I have to remove them, like having a digital bonfire of their memory box together or something. That's not what happened at all, in my opinion, because if it was, she wouldn't be asking the internet, can cops retrieve deleted text messages, or how far back can phone companies retrieve text messages. She was worried about the cops finding out and reading the things that she and Chris were saying. Now, was she worried because what she was saying to Chris or what Chris was saying to her, the conversations they had, were criminal in nature and, suggested that she may have known something about what he was going to do or was even involved in what he did. Once again, I don't think so. I think she realized how bad she looked and that the text messages were not going to support the narrative she was setting, that it wasn't that serious, and she was encouraging Chris to get back together with his wife. So as a precursor to what I'm about to dive into, I do want to make the clear distinction that in my personal opinion, I believe Nicole Kessinger was not and is not being honest about a lot of things. I don't think she was being honest about not knowing Shanann's name, not knowing Shanann and Chris were clearly still trying to make things work, or at least Shanann was, and not knowing that Shanann was pregnant. I also don't think she's been honest about the level of seriousness that she had placed on her relationship with Chris. She does a lot of exhibition and setting the narrative during her police interviews, explaining that things with her and Chris were still very new, still developing, but she was holding back and being cautious because she didn't know him that well yet. And I don't believe that she encouraged Chris to work things out with his wife. Well, she may have made statements like that, but those statements were not made, in my opinion, in good faith. They weren't made because she genuinely hoped that he and Shanann would rediscover their love and ride off into the sunset together. I think they were made for a different reason. I think that if she said anything about him, working on his relationship with Shanann and getting his family back together, if those statements were made, they were not made because she genuinely wanted that for him and she wanted happiness for him. I think that they were manipulative. We're also going to talk about that in a minute.
And we were there not very long, but that time I saw a picture of his wife and one of his kids. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, she's so beautiful. And I took a step back and I was just like, this man has a gorgeous house. He has beautiful babies. He has a beautiful wife. He has an awesome job. Why would he want to leave this? And I remember talking to him about it. And that was the first time that I tried to actually say, what do you think about not separating from your wife? What if you really try to work on this? And he had expressed to me that we've tried to work on this and it's not working. So that is why we're separating. And I spent some time, just, kind of, because it almost made me feel bad, where I was to the point where I'm engaging in a relationship with a man who, the way he described it, is in a contractual agreement, but was not in an emotional relationship with somebody. And for me, the way I would have preferred to do this is to have waited till that contractual agreement was also done, and he was done. And he could have approached me and said, I'm just had a divorce, maybe we could take this slow. What do you think? But instead it was, oh, we're separated and we're working on a divorce. And that is the part that I feel bad about, because I should have waited on that and I didn't. And, I was just like, well, they're already there. So, but then being in that house was just like, why? Fix this. Find a way to fix this. Make it work, and I was trying to push him to do it. And he seemed pretty reluctant to do it. He didn't want to. And, I don't know, we were still seeing each other fairly frequently, but I kind of backed away so we weren't hanging out quite as much. And we were still close, but it was just I really wanted him to try. I wanted to know that he tried and it didn't work. And then he moved on, not that, they both kind of tried and then he got himself into a situation with somebody else. And I don't know. I just thought he had a beautiful life going on and he could have made it work. That was the way I looked at it from the outside.
So is this something you reflected on since this event, or was this you?
No, I was doing it then.
You said this doesn't look right. He's kind of, I don't want to be responsible for breaking up a marriage, especially with 2 children. Is that kind of the gist I'm getting here?
I didn't think it didn't look right. I mean, I think he was legitimately sleeping in the basement, and I didn't think that these two were, I think it was hey, we're both stuck in this house for now. We got to sell this. In the meantime, you live here, I live here. We sleep in different rooms, take care of the kids. That's just kind of how I took that. And no, I didn't think it didn't look right. I just thought it just seemed like he had so much going on, and it was just beautiful that I was like, why don't you just try this out, you know, and see if you can fix it? And he'd always be like, well, what about us? What about us? I'm like, don't worry about us. Like, that is more important. Like, try to see if you can, like, salvage whatever it is that you have going on with your wife. And you know, I always got the impression that he was a great father to his kids, like, always. And so, you know, I was like, and be the dad that you want to be. I was like, and see if you can make it work. And he just, like, we kind of talked about it off and on for like a few weeks. And I was just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I think I was kind of like cold feeting about it after I went over his house. And so this was like pretty early on. And then he told me that, he went to North Carolina, and he was like, I'm going to talk to her when I'm in North Carolina and see if I can get her to do this, to like try to like rekindle the flame.
Okay, so try to salvage his relationship as you've been asking him to do.
And then if he
when
decided,
did you go to North Carolina?
I think it was like the last week of July, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So, I mean, this was like a couple weeks that I was just kind of like trying to push him to do that.
Let's pause at North Carolina.
So in Nicole's version of events, she's basically begging Chris to work things out with Shanann so he can continue living his beautiful life with his beautiful family in his beautiful house. And then she says he went to North Carolina, and the communication between herself and Chris was that he was trying to reignite the flame with Shanann or whatever. If that's true, and if that's what Nicole wanted and what she believed, her Google searches during this time do not reflect that. On July 24th, she searched up, "Man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife." On August 8th, Nicole searched Google on topics related to marrying your mistress. And on August 4th, at 12:45 a.m., Nicole spent over 2 hours Googling wedding dresses. Now let's quickly look at a few text messages exchanged between Chris and Nicole and see if Nicole's behavior and words match what she was telling the police, that it was never all that serious between herself and Chris, that she wanted to be respectful and make sure his marriage was truly over before they moved forward. On June 29th, Chris texted Nicole saying, quote, "I'm still going to see you. It won't be as often as we like, but I will make it happen. You think you're the only one addicted right now? I'm so hooked on you." End quote. 45 minutes later, he sent another text, quote, "Sleeping without your warm body next to me isn't going to be fun tonight." End quote. The following day at 4:28 p.m., Nicole texted, quote, "I have an idea, by the way. I have a free hot stay at the Holiday Inn. Not sure if you can swing it this month, but we can road trip to the mountains or southern Colorado for a day or two if you want. Won't cost a dime, LOL." End quote. At 6:39 p.m., Nicole texted, quote, "I'm not going to stop seeing you. I made up my mind. Are we bad people?" End quote. So, did Nicole really think that Chris and Shanann were going through a divorce? If they were going through a divorce and he was kind of building a connection with somebody else and they were going to be respectful about it, why would she ask him, "Are we bad people?" There's also texts exchanged between Chris and Nicole throughout August where he tells her that he misses her. He calls her his sexy empanada for some odd reason, probably an inside joke that we hopefully never have to know the context of. But this doesn't sound like somebody who's like pulling back or, being reserved and trying to be respectful of any, relationship that Chris had going on at the time. It sounds like somebody who's like, I don't give a fuck. Honestly, I'm going to keep seeing you and I'm going to, keep doing what makes me happy and what makes us happy, because that's all I care about. Now, Nicole told the police during her interview that she believed she had convinced Chris to work on his relationship, and she figured that their relationship, the one between Chris and Nicole, was going to end, even though during his time in North Carolina, Chris spoke with Nicole often. And when Chris got back from North Carolina, he told Nicole that it was completely over. He and Shanann were preparing to finalize their divorce, and they were making arrangements to sell their house, so he needed to find a new place to live, and this is when Nicole jumped in and offered to help him find a new apartment, and they discussed what custody with Bella and Cece would look like.
It's like, we'll pick out a few spots, and if you want me to come with you, I'll go look at them, but you
You said earlier that he had never, or that the apartment wasn't for you and him. It was just for him and his children.
Oh, yes.
It wasn't, you had no intentions of moving in with him.
No. I have my own spot. I still have a lease there till July, and even then, he never asked me to move in with him.
Okay.
And I never tried to move in with him. I mean, I told him, I really tried to take everything with this whole situation very slow. The only part that I screwed up on was the fact that he wasn't completely separated from her when him and I decided to spend time with each other. That is where I screwed up. But other than that, everything else, it was always like, you build your life, I'm going to build my life, we will intertwine them, but I am not ready to like do this. And he respected that. And I even said that, and I don't know, that might be in the text, but said that too, where it's like, Chris, like, you need space. Like, you're just getting out of a divorce. Like, personally, I think jumping into a new relationship is a little quick. It's like, I was in a relationship earlier this year, and I think this is also a little quick. And I'm like, so why don't we take our time? And I'm like, if you guys end up doing a week on, a week off with your kids, I'm like, the week you have your kids, be with your children. And the week that you don't, I'm like, I don't even want to see you every day. I'm like, I think we should spend like a few days of that together. I'm like, because I like my space, and I think you need your space. I think you need your space to like develop your identity again and like get it back, because I think he's just been like so wrapped up in this whole thing that he's got in his own life and his life that he doesn't remember probably what it's like to like be single or have time where it's like just him.
Sure. And
so I was just like, like, embrace that. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I really try to like take it smart with all that. And it was the same thing with his kids. I was just like, like, and we talk about things every once in a while where I'd be like, hey, if I ever meet, cause like I have a lot of house plants. It's a good example. So I have a lot of house plants, and I told him, I was like, one day, if I ever meet your kids, I was like, I'm going to show these girls how to like paint pottery and plants. I was like, I think they would love to see something grow that they built. I think it would be really, really cute. And like little stuff like that, but it wasn't very frequent. It wasn't, hey, we should get married, and hey, we should have babies, and hey, I want to live with you, and hey, I need to meet your children now, and let's cut the mom out. It was never like that.
And there was never any conversation about, but we can't do this with her around. We can't do this with the kids around. No. He never said that. You never said that.
No.
Once again, Nicole is doing the most to convince everyone that she was never that serious about Chris, and she wanted to take it very slowly. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe once she went into his home and saw he had this whole life outside of her, and she may have reevaluated what she was doing with him. But then why look up wedding dresses? And why ask Google if the married man you're seeing is ever going to leave his wife and marry you? I think, in my opinion, allegedly, don't come for me, Nicole did want a serious relationship with Chris, but she continued bringing up the fact that he had this wife and these kids and this baggage, more or less, and that this was what was preventing her from being all in. Essentially, the message was sent to Chris that, if all of these things didn't exist, we could be together no problem and build a life together. But the wife and the kids and the established life was what was stopping Nicole from jumping in with Chris, which she knew very well. That was what he wanted more than anything. He wanted her more than anything. As he had told her, he was addicted to her. And it seems that she had communicated to him that she was also addicted to him. And, he said, you're not the only one that's addicted. You think you're the only one that's addicted? Ugh, gross. I want to talk about some other internet searches Nicole Kessinger allegedly made months before she claims she even met Chris Watts, months before she even worked at Anadarko. So in the discovery documents, there is a phone data review report. And the first entry in that chronological report shows that Nicole performed an internet search for the name Shanann Watts in September of 2017. She also searched for the name Chris Watts on August 3rd, 2017. So the month before she allegedly searched for Shanann, even though she wouldn't officially allegedly meet Chris until June of 2018. And Nicole searched Shanann Watts' name again on January 7th, 2018. Once again, months before Nicole and Chris began a relationship of any kind. Months before Nicole even knew Chris Watts. And this is really weird. That she would be searching for either Chris or Shanann Watts before she ever met Chris Watts or had a relationship with him. Now, Amanda Purcell was the records supervisor at the Frederick Police Department, and she told Crime Online that the entry from September 1st, 2017, where it showed that Nicole searched Shanann Watts, she said that was a typo. Now, let's go with that for a moment. Let's say it was a typo or some mistake during the phone extraction, that still means that before Nicole ever interacted with Chris, she was searching both his name and his wife's name, because the January 2018 search for Shanann Watts was not a typo, and the August 2017 search for Chris Watts was not a typo. When she says typo, I think she means that, like, when the police or the detectives did the phone extraction and then typed the information into the report, that they had made a typo. Maybe that's what that means. But I do not believe the September 2017 Shanann Watts search was a typo at all. And the Weld County District Attorney, Michael Rourke, would speak out after Amanda Purcell came out with this typo defense, and he said that the reports that we all seen, the discovery, it's like over 2,000 pages, he said those reports reflected what was shown in the forensic analysis of Nicole's phone. He said, quote, "The dates to which you are referring in 2017, where it appears she Googled or otherwise searched Shanann, was data that came off her phone. It's not a typographical error in the report. The detectives are reporting what was contained in the data from her phone. I don't know the answer to the question of why or how those dates ended up on her phone," end quote. So Crime Online asked if the DA's office had questioned Nicole about this, or if they planned to question her about the data which suggested that she was aware of Chris and Shanann Watts for up to a year before the murders. But the DA Rourke, he said that Chris's guilty plea precluded any need to further probe the result of the forensic analysis of Nicole's phone. Rourke said, quote, "When you ask me if I verified that information, the answer to your question is no. Nicole Kessinger told us that she met and started the relationship with the defendant in 2018. So where that anomaly in the data comes from, I can't answer it for you. I don't know the answer to it. I have absolutely no reason to investigate Nicole Kessinger at this point in time. This is not a witch hunt. My job is to investigate and prosecute who was responsible for the deaths of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. We have done that. I have no information nor any belief that any other criminal defendant is out there who is responsible for their deaths in any way, shape, or form," end quote. So basically, when Chris Watts confessed, and when he pleaded guilty, the investigation was over. And that's completely understandable. Nicole searching Chris and Shanann the year before she claims she met Chris is not a criminal act, and it does not mean she took part in the crimes that Chris would commit. But it does suggest that Nicole is lying about not knowing Shanann's name. And yeah, that's not criminal, but it's weird, because the question then would be, why? Why was she looking Chris up? Why was she looking his wife up? Was it her plan all along to meet him, start a relationship with him, and make him hers, despite the fact that he was married and the father of 2 young daughters? Once again, that's not illegal. That's not criminal. But it is manipulative, and it suggests that the connection she wanted with Chris was far more important to her than she let on.
Thank you so much for coming out here with me, Christopher. I am having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast. I am so out of breath.
Hi. It's me. I miss your face. I was just calling to say hi. Call me back. Bye. Hi. It's me. You guys just call me back when you have a chance. Bye.
And I had to play that video, and I had to play those voicemails from Nicole to Chris, because in that video, like, "Oh, thank you, Christopher. Thank you for being a good man and being with me on this trip." Like, it shows you this does not seem like a woman who was kind of just in this for a few weeks and it wasn't that serious, and, she didn't really expect anything from him. She kind of seems head over heels, which is, I think, once again, manipulative and intentional. She wanted to be to Chris everything that his wife couldn't be or wouldn't be. She wanted to be this loving and feminine and warm and nurturing presence, because he was telling her that's what he wasn't getting from Shanann. Nicole didn't even start working with Chris until the summer of 2018. How did she even know who Chris was? Nicole didn't even start working with Chris until the early summer of 2018. How did she even know who Chris Watts was a year before that? Was this like a long game? Was she like the architect of her own romantic future? I don't know. I really am interested in hearing all of your theories about why this would be. Because even if you take that September 2017 search for Shanann Watts out of the picture. Let's say it was a typo, even though the DA, he says it wasn't. Let's just say it was. She's still searching them up before she even meets Chris. Why? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm very curious. So when Chris's wife and children went missing, Nicole said that she gave him the benefit of the doubt. She didn't even consider that he'd done anything to them. She said murder was not something on the top of her mind when a wife who's going through divorce drops off the map for a day. On Monday, August 13th, Nicole spoke to Chris briefly in the morning, and he didn't mention anything about his wife and kids being missing. But she did know that he wasn't coming into work that day on Monday because he told her the day before. Why did he tell her the day before, which was Sunday? It's because Chris knew that he was going to kill his wife and his kids that night. Now, during the police interview, the detective tells Nicole that they want to know where she was on the 13th. They want to make sure that she was nowhere near Chris. And it's weird because Nicole mentioned someone named Jim, who she saw that night and she hung out with that night after work. And the police are like, well, we can reach out to him and verify. This is very easy. And she clearly does not want this to happen.
And I don't want to cause you concern. We want to know where you were that day too. You're dating a man who did some egregious stuff, and we want to show that you were never near him that day. Period.
I mean, you can track my.
No, yeah, I mean that was something we will have to get a warrant for, anyways. I'm just saying, if we asked for it, would you have any objections to that?
You can have it.
So.
I'm a pretty boring person.
Well, it sounds like you just went to work that day and then you came home and you were there at 3:45.
Yeah, like give or take like 5 minutes.
Whatever.
But yeah, so 3:45, I meet Jim there. Yeah.
And so Jim understand from an investigative point, he could be a person who could say, yeah, I was there at 3:45. He doesn't know Chris. He doesn't know anything. He could say with one phone call, yeah, she came in at 3:45. Done.
Totally.
Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't have to ask anything more than, hi, Chris, my name's Kevin. Or Jim. And I'm not saying you have to go to.
Just leave Jim alone.
If at some point I needed Jim's info to, let's say we couldn't find your phone records, would you tell me who Jim was?
I will give them to you.
Would you tell me who Jim was if I couldn't?
If you had to. Okay. I don't really want to involve him in this. That's not fair to him. That's not, no. If I do not have to do that.
That's fine.
She's like, leave Jim alone. You can have my phone, et cetera, but you deleted so much stuff off your phone, Nicole, not just texts, but pictures and internet search history. So your phone isn't a super reliable narrator at this point.
Yeah. So anyways, Chris was like, call me.
And this is the 3:45 text.
Yeah, he sent me like a few. I think there was 3 of them, and I don't remember what the other one said, but something about like, yeah, my family's gone, or I don't remember verbatim, but call me when you can, or call me when you have a chance, something to that effect. And so when he told me call me, I was like kind of alerted, where I was like, okay, what's going on, but first when he told me like his family was like not home, that didn't really seem odd to me that his family wasn't home. It was really vague. I'm like, okay, like, are they at the grocery store? Like, elaborate. And so, but he says, call me like it's like an emergency, but then just says that they're not there. And so I'm like really like floored by that. Well, not like floored, but just kind of like, he says, call me. So I'm concerned. And then he's really vague. So I'm like, maybe he just wants to talk to me. I don't know. I think it took me a little while to like really process the severity of the situation, just because this is not something that you expect to see every day. And the way that he talked to me made me believe that this is not what was going on at all.
Okay, so you make a phone call to him and you guys have a conversation.
I did. I stepped outside.
This is 3:45.
Ish. I mean, well, like, I think I actually interacted with Jim for like probably a good 15 or 20 minutes. I mean, he's my guest. He's in my house. So I don't think I called him right away. But like, I mean, I'm trying to balance the fact that I have my friend here, and then Chris is saying that something needs to be addressed. But to me, it didn't sound like an emergency. I mean, it's all the time. Like, people aren't home right now. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I have to take this call.
It didn't register as being critical.
No. I mean, it was the way he said it. And I was like, okay. So I remember hanging out with Jim for a while, and then I stepped outside and I made a call like out on my back patio, and I called him. And he didn't answer the phone. And then he texted me back. Oh, no. Did he answer the phone? I don't remember. I think he missed my call, and then he called me back. or he just answered. Either way, it was a very short talk to him where he was just like, I have to go. The cops are here. And I don't remember if he said that on the phone or over text.
That's okay.
I'm so tired.
That's fine. You don't.
But either way, like,
it's just
cops,
the context.
Yeah, I mean, you guys will figure it out. The cops are here, and I'm just like, all right. I mean, like, it was weird that it wasn't even that weird to me that she left her phone just because I leave my phone, but it was weird to me that she left her purse. But knowing the fact that that girl was, like, always on her phone, then, yeah, I guess that is kind of odd.
Like, she lived on her phone, I think,
yeah.
pretty much, is my understanding of her and a phone. So I don't know if you knew that.
I did.
Until prior to the media stuff or just from Chris.
I did.
So did that strike you as odd? But you're thinking maybe she just left.
I just thought she needed to, like, get away from the situation. I mean, that didn't seem that awkward to me that a couple that is going through separation would be like, I need to leave. I just need some space. Like, it didn't even, like, process. I was like, okay, like, give her some space.
Okay, so Nicole says, at first there weren't like a ton of concerns, no alarms were going off because, maybe Shanann just wanted some space and time and she's mad at Chris, but it's weird that she left her purse and yada, yada, yada. But then she saw some red flags and this is when she cut Chris off and stopped talking to him.
So Tuesday, after that conversation, I told him, I told him to delete his text because I knew he was, like, going crazy texting me, and I didn't want any of his friends to see him texting me because I don't think they knew about me. It had nothing to do with you guys. It was just like, I mean, and you'll see him,
The secrecy of your relationship.
Pretty much. And I just, like, feel like he was, like, texting me so much openly, and he had friends there that I was like, I didn't want them to see that. And so I was, like, trying to get him to slow down. And then I told him, too, like, after he lied to me, I was just kind of like, I was done. And I was trying to find a way to, like, get away from the situation without alarming him or panicking him. So I told him, like, everything is all good. I'm still here for you. And I feel bad because, like, I lied to him. But, I mean, I, like, just try to keep him calm. And then I told him, like, contact me once they find your family. And then we'll talk.
That was Tuesday?
That was Tuesday.
Okay.
And he sent me a text back saying something along the lines of, like, what did he say? Something like, please just think of, and, like, I kept telling him I was scared. I was really freaking scared. In fact, that's another thing I'm missing. I'm so tired. Monday night, like, I called him back in the middle of the night because I could not sleep. I could not sleep at all. And I remember when I called him, he sounded like he was sleeping. And I was like, how the hell can you sleep right now? That's exactly what I said to him. And he was just like, I'm just kind of dozing off and on the couch. And I just remember thinking, like, I haven't shut my eyes yet. And this is not even my family. And so that happened on Monday night. So then I was going somewhere with that had to do with Tuesday. I forgot what it was. I'm so sorry. Take
a breath and relax. We're almost to Wednesday, and then we're out of here.
Yeah. So then, So then once he lied to me, I just really trying to, like, push him away, and he was like, just don't forget, like, the person that you knew me to be when you were with me, or something like that, and, like,
was that strange?
It just kind of sounded almost like a farewell, and, like, I didn't think it was too weird because I was like, I think he realizes that I'm really upset that he lied to me, and I think he's aware of the fact that I'm probably about to walk away from him. So I think that was, like, his way of, like, saying goodbye. So it didn't really seem strange in the context of what was going on between, like, the him and I part of stuff. And then, and I kept asking him too, like, what did you do, Chris? What did you do? And he was like, I didn't do anything. And I'm like, where's your family? And, like, I asked him that. I don't know if I started doing that on Tuesday or if I started doing that on Monday, but I think it was Tuesday because I don't really think I was that alarmed on Monday. And then, so that was supposed to be, like, our final sign-off text. And then Jim got there at my house, and I was hanging out with Jim. But I was still like in my head, just kind of like stressed out. And I remember I like walked out of the room, went in my bedroom, and texted Chris one more time. And I told him, I was like, if you did something bad, I was like, you're going to ruin your life. And I was like, and if you did something bad, I was like, you're going to ruin my life. And I was like, and I promise you that. And he responded back to me and he's like, I didn't hurt my family, Nikki. And that was like the last text. That was the last time we ever talked. And I never said another word to him after that.
That was Tuesday.
That was Tuesday. And then he left me alone. He gave me the space that I asked him. He respected it. And he didn't like mess with me at all.
Was that a phone call where you said?
No, that's all Tuesday. Text Tuesday.
Text Tuesday.
Just call it
All
Text
text.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Everything was text. I did not talk to that man on the phone all that day. I mean, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was all text.
What are you thinking? What were you thinking, that he maybe did something to his family?
Yeah, I started getting really scared.
What caused that
The
thought?
fact that he lied to me.
Okay.
And that she still wasn't home and it was day 2. Like, I figure if you're upset for a day, you leave for a day, but you come back. And she wasn't back. And it was like midday. And not only that, but like, she doesn't have her phone. She doesn't have her car. She doesn't have the kids' EpiPen. She doesn't have any of that. So what I'm thinking in my head is like, for a night, if you're really upset, somebody comes one of your friends picks you up, like, okay. But I can't explain that for 2 days. Like, that just doesn't like logically process in my mind as something that any woman I know would do. The one night thing, I know women that do that. But the 2 night thing, no. And so I'm like, she's still not back. And he just lied to me. And it made me, like, I just started getting scared. And I remember, like, telling him that throughout the whole day. Like, I don't even know how many times I texted him that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's, like, 8-10 times. I'm just like, I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. And one of the last texts that I sent to him, too, I told him, I said, I'm scared because I feel like I don't know who you are anymore.
So once again, we have Nicole Kessinger telling the police openly that she told Chris to delete his texts. You told him to delete his texts after his wife and kids went missing, so his friends wouldn't see him texting you because they're going to be looking over his shoulder and watching what he's texting. Because why would they not assume that Chris would be on his phone a lot since his wife and daughters were gone, and maybe he's communicating with the police, or maybe he's just like texting people? Like, I don't think his friends are really going to be, all this concerned and be like, well, Chris is on his phone a lot. I wonder if he's texting a mistress. I don't believe her, okay? This is just my opinion. I don't believe her. She literally says to the police, it has nothing to do with you guys. Yes, it did, Nicole, because you Googled, can the police retrieve text messages? Of course it had something to do with them and them seeing it. And Nicole's just so big on honesty. And she's like, oh, Chris lied to me about his wife being pregnant. And I was like, well, if you lied about that, you can lie about anything. And I'm going to say the same thing to you, Nicole. If you can lie about that, you can lie about anything. But I will also again say, I think Nicole is lying to protect her reputation, to protect her image, so that, it doesn't look as bad as it was once it gets out in the public. Because I think at that point she kind of knew Chris did something. This is going to blow up. This is going to be big, Scott Peterson style. And I'm going to be the Amber Fry. And I don't really want that. I don't want to come off looking as bad as I do look. So Nicole said she found it odd that Chris was able to sleep on Monday night. She said that was really odd. She was like, I couldn't even sleep. How could he sleep? And so by Tuesday, she was already trying to push him away. By Tuesday, Nicole is asking, Chris, where is your family? Did you do something? And then she told him that this was just not working for her and she needed space. And that was the last time they communicated. And the last text that Chris sent her was like, Nicole, I didn't hurt my family. And Nicole, I didn't do anything, something like that. Oh, and I almost forgot, Monday night, Nicole said she talked to Chris and that he mentioned Shanann had left her wedding ring behind. And Nicole told him to pawn it, okay? The day, like one full day when his wife and kids are missing. And he's like, oh, she left her ring. And Nicole's like, pawn that bitch. Like, what? And she's like, you're probably not going to get a lot of money for it, but pawn it. It's weird. And on Tuesday the 14th, Nicole was making a lot more Google searches, right? All centered around her text messages. Can cops trace text messages? How long do phone companies keep text messages? What's the difference between text message content and text message detail? All of these internet searches were then deleted by Nicole before she went into the police station for her interview. And I want to quickly talk about Nicole and Chris's communication beforehand. At 9:28 p.m. on August 12th, Chris called Nicole and they talked for almost 2 hours, with the conversation ending around 11:19 p.m. This was the time Shanann's flight from Phoenix was supposed to be arriving. As we know, it ended up being delayed. She didn't get home till a few hours later. On the evening of the 13th, after the murders had been committed and after Shanann Watts had been reported missing to the police by her friend Nicole, at 5:01 p.m., Nicole Kessinger made 2 calls to Chris, which went unanswered. She deleted them from her call history. At 5:30 p.m., Chris called Nicole. That call went unanswered. She deleted it from her call history. At 11:09 p.m., Nicole called Chris, and they talked on the phone for 51 minutes. She deleted this call from her history 8 minutes later. On August 14th at 12:02 a.m., Nicole searched for Shanann Watts on Google. At 12:08 p.m., Nicole spent nearly 4 hours searching the internet for Chris Watts and news accounts of Shanann's disappearance. Once again, these were deleted. So on Tuesday, Nicole was looking up news about Shanann's disappearance even at 12 a.m., okay, which is technically still Monday night. And this is the point where she claimed she was not that concerned and she didn't think anything crazy was going on. She continues to search for these types of things throughout the day. And the discovery notes say, quote, "These searches were conducted frequently by Kessinger throughout the next several days. She deleted every one afterwards," end quote. Nicole and Chris also had multiple phone calls during this time, which Nicole deleted from her call logs. Now, I know there's theories out there that Nicole Kessinger had something to do with what happened to Shanann and her children, and I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment, just not in the way that others do. For instance, there's a lot of talk about phone pings putting Nicole in the vicinity of the Watts home at 6 a.m. on August 13th. I think this could be explained by looking at her route to work and knowing that her phone may have hit that tower as she drove by. I don't put much stock into it, and we know that Chris wasn't even there because he'd left for the oil fields about an hour prior. There's also speculation that Nicole may have been listening in on a call that Chris had with the detective. Once again, that's possible, but at the end of the day, it doesn't prove anything besides that she and Chris were still talking. And maybe she wanted to hear from the police about what they felt Chris's involvement was. Maybe she was like, "Hey, I want to hear this call with you and the detectives because I want to see if you're like a suspect or what they think, or if you're telling me the full truth." That could have happened. It's weird. It still doesn't mean that she had anything to do with what happened to Shanann and Nico and Bella and Cece. Now, at the end of the day, if Nicole had been actively involved in what happened, Chris Watts would have already done thrown her ass under the bus and exposed all of those details. We know he would have, right? And although he's tried to place blame on her for being a temptress and having soft lips and honey that pierces his soul, luring him to the dark side, he's never alleged that she was involved. And if she had been, he would have spilled all of that by now. He really would have. I think that that should put to rest any questions about whether Nicole Kessinger was actively involved or not. But do I think that Nicole knew the hold that she had over Chris? Do I think she knew how to use it to her benefit? I definitely do. I don't think she knew that it would lead him to taking the lives of his entire family, but I think she certainly put pressure on him and kind of placed his wife and children between them, telling him that she didn't want to get too close and too involved when he still had all of this unfinished business, like a whole family, a whole ass family. We know she told her friend that she wanted to come first to her man, and she knew that this would never happen when the man she was dating had kids. I think she tried to push Chris a little bit and almost see how willing he would be to kind of move his kids to the back burner in favor of her. Like, how present did he expect to be in their lives after the divorce? How often would he have them? She told the police that she didn't even plan to see Chris every day, and while he had his children with him, she would make herself scarce. She probably told Chris the same thing. I think Nicole wanted to see how willing Chris was to maybe not be as much of a present father, and maybe would he be willing to walk away from the children from his first marriage so that he and Nicole could start their own life and their own family, a family that would take priority for him. But she was playing a dangerous game because she intentionally set Chris up to be eating out of the palm of her hand. And what she wanted to see was that he would do anything for her and that she was his priority, which ultimately is exactly what he showed her. I just can't believe, I cannot believe that Nicole would ever expect that he would show her in the way that he did. Nicole Kessinger's behavior with Chris was rife with emotional influence and unspoken pressure, which is a subtle yet powerful dynamic. She may not have told Chris to hurt anyone, but her words, tone, questions, and emotional responses might have signaled to him that his family was in the way. I believe she communicated to him that his wife and kids were an obstacle to their ideal life together, and this happens far more often than people realize, especially in an emotionally charged, high-stakes affair. Nicole telling Chris that she couldn't move forward with him until she knew he had tried everything to make it work with Shanann. Her walking into his house and being like, oh, it's real now, I see you have all of this, and honestly, I feel kind of weird about it, and I don't really know if I want to proceed. That may have created a psychological pressure cooker where Chris began to internalize the need to eliminate the problem, even if no explicit demand was made. Nicole may not have wanted Chris to hurt his family, but she may have unknowingly planted the seed by consistently treating them as barriers. And that's often enough for a man who's emotionally and mentally weak, desperate, and already spiraling. It was kind of like Nicole was saying, you can't have both. Choose me or don't waste my time. I think that Nicole Kessinger wasn't necessarily malicious, but very emotionally underdeveloped. She wanted the intensity of passion, the fantasy of a fresh start, and the illusion of being the main character in someone else's life. When confronted with the reality that the man she was hoping to achieve all of this with had children, a pregnant wife, and years of history, I think Nicole resented the complexity of the situation, even if she couldn't admit that, even if she couldn't admit it to herself. And that resentment could have shown up subtly, but still sent a strong and clear message to Chris. The way Nicole would have shown her displeasure of the situation would be through withdrawal, like, hey, don't worry about me, fix things with your wife. This has nothing to do with me. Like, I'm a step back and let you handle this. And when paired with the emotional closeness and the physical closeness that Nicole and Chris had already experienced, this would have felt like Chris's favorite drug being pulled away from him. And listen, at the end of the day, Chris Watts isn't a criminal mastermind. He's a passive, emotionally repressed, and deeply insecure asshole. Like, he's a bad person, but he's not this smart criminal. He didn't need to be told what to do. He just needed someone to create the fantasy that life could be beautiful without his current family, that a clean slate was possible, and that his wife and children were the only things holding him back from that utopia that Nicole had painted for him. He didn't need to be pushed. He just needed to be led. And once Nicole became a symbol of this utopian life he thought he deserved, he truly believed he deserved, the moral bridge collapsed, and he wasn't choosing between two women at that point. He was choosing between two identities. And he killed to step into the identity that felt new and full of possibility. And still, Nicole Kessinger isn't to blame for this. Nicole Kessinger didn't do this. The blame for what happened falls squarely on the shoulders and the soul of Chris Watts. And it is a tale as old as time, and it brings to mind something known as the 90-10 rule. This is a concept that refers to how people often risk a strong, stable relationship, aka the 90%, for something they feel is missing, the 10%. So the 90% would be core needs, emotional support, stability, trust, shared connection, shared history, companionship, unconditional love, family, life structure. The things that most good relationships are built on, and the things that honestly bind us together and can be used to survive the hard times. You may not always be happy with your partner. You may sometimes argue or have issues. You may not even like everything about your partner, but ultimately your partner shows up for you, loves you, and contributes to your life in meaningful ways. Love is not an eternal state of being. It's not like you fall in love and you just stay there. It's about finding someone you can trust and build with, who you make the choice to love every single day, in spite of their flaws and in spite of any small issues or large issues that come up between you. On the other hand, there's always going to be that 10% that's missing in your partner, because no one can be 100% everything that someone else wants. So, for instance, Chris and Shanann shared a lot that tied them together, but he wished she would pay more attention to him. She wouldn't be as demanding or as domineering. She would make him feel like a man. Shanann wasn't stroking Chris's ego enough. She was too critical. She expected too much from him. She didn't give him enough gratitude. Now, reading Shanann's messages to Chris and to other people about Chris, I have no doubt that she would have bent over backwards to fix any issues that he had with her and, work on their marriage because she really wanted to make it work. She was asking him to go to therapy. She had bought books, asked him to read the books that she had read. She wanted them to work together, to keep themselves and their family together. But Chris didn't give her the opportunity to do that because it was easier for him to go out and find that missing 10% in someone else, especially when he still had the 90% at home. So Chris was feeling bored, disconnected, unfulfilled in some way, and instead of communicating and working through it, he began focusing on what he and Shanann didn't have. Well, specifically what Shanann didn't have. And then along came Nicole Kessinger, someone new, someone exciting, who seemed to offer that missing 10%, attention, validation, ego boost, etc. Chris was on a dopamine high. Here was a woman who truly saw him, who made him feel competent and masculine and desired, who wasn't plodding through the mundane and stressful day-to-day stuff like parenting and paying bills and coordinating schedules and bickering about who left their socks on the floor and who didn't do the dishes. And so flooded with dopamine and limerence, Chris Watts risked everything to chase this new high. He compared the reality of Shanann with the fantasy of what Nicole Kessinger could be and what she could be for him. The brain responds very strongly to novelty and dopamine spikes, which can trick someone into thinking the missing 10% is more important than it actually is. It can even convince someone that they need that missing 10%, that they can't survive without it, and that this missing 10% is what will finally make them happy and feel complete. Chris had a wife who supported him emotionally, financially. She respected and loved him in public and in private, and she gave him 90%. Some might argue that she gave him more, but he became obsessed with his girlfriend who gave him the 10%. Freedom, ego boost, sexual attention, newness, giggling voicemails, that honeymoon period feel. Chris destroyed everything for a temporary thrill that ultimately collapsed and led to tragedy for everyone involved. He traded depth, history, and true connection for a fleeting fantasy, and the people who loved him the most paid for his thoughtless gamble with their lives. Chris Watts is the ultimate self-righteous family annihilator. He saw himself as the victim and the martyr, and he still does. He blamed Shanann for the breakdown of their marriage, and he still does. He wanted to appear like the perfect dad and the loving husband on the outside while hiding a growing internal resentment. And rather than confront problems directly, he let issues fester. He built up a secret life and ultimately chose elimination over confrontation. And when people live double lives, serious issues ensue. It's mentally very damaging. It fractures you. People will experience something called cognitive dissonance, which is the mental discomfort from holding conflicting beliefs. Chris wanted to be with Nicole, but he was a father of two with a pregnant wife. So instead of facing the shame, financial consequences, and public fallout of divorce, he sought to erase the contradiction by erasing the people who represented it. This kind of emotional compartmentalization is common in people who commit extreme acts. They dehumanize their victims, they rationalize their choices, and they shut off empathy to carry out their plan. Chris Watts showed signs of emotional shallowness and a limited capacity for empathy, especially once he was fixed on a new goal. During his confessions, he described the murders with a chillingly calm demeanor, even when recalling his daughter Bella's last words to him. And even after confessing, even after being handed multiple life sentences and having the full weight of public condemnation on his shoulders, Chris still struggles to take full responsibility. He continues to portray himself in subtle and not so subtle ways as a victim of circumstance, a man who snapped, and someone who made a mistake rather than someone who made a choice. In my opinion, Chris shows what mental health professionals call covert narcissism. Not the loud, flashy kind of narcissism, but the quiet, insecure, image-obsessed version. He cannot tolerate being seen as bad, evil, or irredeemable, even though he is all of those things. He craves validation and admiration, and he is deeply insecure beneath the surface. Even when confronted with overwhelming evidence, a covert narcissist will distort reality to protect their fragile ego. Admitting full responsibility for the murders of your pregnant wife and 2 young daughters is psychologically annihilating to someone whose entire identity hinges on appearing good and moral. One of the most powerful defense mechanisms that Chris uses is externalization, projecting the blame outward. He blamed Shanann early on, saying she was controlling and nagging. He told the police that she killed their daughters in an attempt for him to buy time and garner sympathy. And in later interviews and letters, he describes himself as being in a dark place or under, evil influences. These are coping statements, not truthful ones. They allow Chris to maintain a sliver of the belief that he's not that kind of man, which is what he desperately needs to believe in order to keep waking up each day in the face of what he did. To truly sit with the reality that he murdered his wife and 2 children, one of whom begged him for her life, while also still maintaining his self-image that he's a good guy and a good father, it's an impossible task. The mind simply cannot hold both of those things at once, so something has to give, and for Chris, it was the truth. He altered the narrative, even to himself, so that it could feel more bearable. Shame is often called the master emotion. For some, it can lead to accountability, repentance, growth, and healing. But for others, especially those with narcissistic tendencies, shame is unbearable, and they feel it must be avoided at all costs. Chris was raised in my opinion, dysfunctional family where emotional expression was limited and where image and appearances really mattered. He never learned to deal with conflict directly, and it's likely he went through his life stuffing down emotions, avoiding confrontation, and presenting a calm exterior at all times. That's what everyone said about him, right? His neighbors, his friends, his family. Nicole never saw him lose his cool, never saw him angry. He was the best guy ever. He'd give you the shirt off his back. If your car broke down, he'd be the first one there to fix it. But under the surface, what's really happening inside, it's not calm at all. It's absolute chaos. So when Chris's marriage was falling apart, when he was faced with hard truths about money, infidelity, fatherhood, divorce, loss, he didn't face it, he deleted it. And even now, the shame is so toxic that his brain finds ways to deny, minimize, or distance himself from full responsibility. Chris Watts may have confessed, but I can promise you that he has never truly accepted the full weight of what he did. And he probably never will. Not because he doesn't know it was wrong, he does, but because to fully own it would require a complete ego death. It would mean seeing himself not as a tragic man who made a mistake, but as a premeditated murderer of his entire family, including his unborn son. The truth is too big for a small, stupid man like Chris Watts to handle. Looking inward takes strength and self-awareness. And these are things, traits, that a baby bitch boy like Chris Watts has never possessed and will never possess. And at the end of the day, that's really what I took from this. Nicole Kessinger, I think, didn't know the dangerous game she was playing because Chris presented such a normal and calm exterior. I think she thought, let me see what I can get this guy to do for me. It was an ego boost for her. He's married, he's got kids. Let me see how much I can have him sacrifice from his life to prove to me that I matter, that I'm a priority to him. I don't think she knew what he was going to do. I don't. I cannot get there. I know there's a lot of people that think that, but I just can't completely get there. A lot of the stuff about her doesn't add up, but I think a lot of it can be explained by the fact that when everything went down and she found out that Shanann was missing and the girls were missing and she started to kind of put 2 and 2 together and then Chris went on and gave that weird interview that literally nobody believed. I think that's when she realized the severity of the situation, and she did damage control. And she was like, oh shit, I've got to come up with a narrative here where I was just girl on the side, and I liked him, but it wasn't like that. I wasn't in love with this guy. You told him you were, okay? You told him you were. That's the thing. Nicole's telling us and the cops, like, it wasn't that serious. But to Chris, she's like, oh my God, like, let's go traveling. Let's be together. Like, I'm not going to stop seeing you. She's feeding this fantasy, even though she's telling everybody in the police and the whole world that, like, no, I was very logical about it. And I told him, like, we can't start anything until you've completely She did not realize the game that she was playing and where it would lead, because she's very emotionally immature. She's just an immature young woman who needed validation and an ego boost. And I don't think that she knew where it was going to go. But that is where it went. And ultimately, I hope that she has learned from this. And as far as Chris Watts, honestly, I wouldn't be upset if he just, passed away in prison or something. Honestly, I don't think he deserves to live. A lot of people have told me in past videos, oh, it's good that he's in prison for life because now he can live with what he did to his wife and his children every day, and he can, like, face the guilt and the shame of that. But, like, you don't understand. People like this actively avoid shame and guilt at all costs. And we can see that illustrated in his behavior, in him blaming Shanann, and him blaming Nicole, and him blaming the devil, and him, creating a relationship with God where he's like, God understands me. God don't understand you, dude. Nobody does. So you just made up an imaginary friend, aka God, because God's not talking to him, to show people that you have acceptance from somebody, that, like, not everybody thinks you're a horrible person, but, like, everybody does, including God. If he's up there, God, give me a sign. You hate Chris Watts too. So ultimately, I don't care what happens to Chris Watts. I don't think he deserves to live because he's not being honest with himself, and he's not going to do any inner work, and he's never going to feel the complete impact of what he did to the 3 people who loved him the most. He will never, because that would mean handling something and having to look inward that he's just not strong enough or good enough or smart enough, honestly, to handle. He can't do it. He can't do it. He is an empty shell of a person. I definitely believe his soul is from the bowels of hell, and I hope he goes back there someday. And I hope that I'm around to celebrate it when he does. Sorry if that's a hot take, but that's all I have for you. I asked you a lot of questions during this video, and I asked you to weigh in the comment section about a lot of different things. So if you haven't done that already, go do that now. Hit the like button if you like this video, share it if you think it was worth sharing, and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you very soon.